folks who are just joining us, I'm Amanda Mahaffey. I'm with the North Atlantic Fire Science Exchange. I'd like to welcome you to this joint webinar offered by the Lake States Fire Science Consortium, the North Atlantic Fire Science Exchange, and the Consortium of Appalachian Fire Managers and Scientists. I'm workshop and webinar coordinator for the North Atlantic. The man behind the curtain who is running the webinar software is Jack McGowan-Sinsky of the Lake States Fire Science Consortium, and we've also been coordinating with Helen Moore of the Appalachian Consortium. For those who may be joining us for the first time, I'll just give you a little background. All three of these fire science exchanges are funded by the Joint Fire Science Program and are 3 of the 15 regional consortia or fire science exchanges across the country. You can see on the slide there, I drew a rough blobby circle around our three regions, and I think our presenters are going to get into a lot of the similarities and differences and information that's applicable to all three. The Joint Fire Sciences Program funds scientific research on wildland fires and distributes results to help policymakers, fire managers, and practitioners to make sound decisions. The Lake States Fire Science Consortium's mission is to accelerate the awareness, understanding, adoption, and sharing of wildland fire science information by federal, tribal, state, local, and private stakeholders across the Lake States and the adjacent Canadian provinces of Ontario and Manitoba. The North Atlantic Fire Science Exchange is a valuable, credible, and relevant hub for fire science information delivery and collaboration between managers and researchers to create a safe and resilient North Atlantic landscape, including our neighbors in the Canadian Maritimes. The Consortium of Appalachian Fire Managers and Scientists helps connect local experts with other managers, practitioners, and scientists to provide the best fire information for your area and demonstrate new knowledge in the field. All the consortia and exchanges strive to be inclusive and neutral science partners, working to foster collaboration among researchers and practitioners and organizations and individuals, and by developing innovative approaches to science delivery, like this webinar, we hope, while facilitating dialogue about new science findings and emerging needs. Before we get started, let's take a few seconds to look at the Adobe Connect webinar interface. And I'll just mention, if anyone is on the phone line, if you happen to find the phone line and dialed in, please mute your phone unless you are a presenter, and that'll help us minimize any background noise during the presentation. So, Adobe Connect webinar software. To ask a question or interact with the attendees, please use the chat box, which should be located in the lower right-hand portion of your screen. Once you type your question, make sure you click the send button, and we'll be monitoring these questions to make sure that there's opportunity to address them. The plan is to address them in the order that they appear, although if we have a couple conversation threads, we'll try to keep the conversation connected. If you'd like to learn more about any of the fire science exchanges, the Lake States Fire Science Consortium website is lakestatesfiresci.net. NAFC's website is firesciencenorthatlantic.org. Please mute your phone if you're not a presenter. Thank you. All right. So just a quick reminder again for folks, if you're not a presenter, please mute your phone, and that'll help minimize the background noise. We're trying to keep the audio through the computer speakers. And last but not least, CAFM's website is appalachianfire.org. I think on all three of our consortia exchange websites, you can sign up to receive newsletters and announcements of other activities. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. So now, without any further ado, just a quick reminder is to please mute your phone if you are not a presenter, and to type questions into the chat box. So today's webinar, Finding the Best Science Available on Fire Ecology and Fire Regimes in Eastern Ecosystems. Our two speakers today are Ilana Abrahamson and Robin Innes. Ilana leads the Fire Effects Information System, FEIS, team of the Fire Modeling Institute in the Fire, Fuel, and Smoke program of the Rocky Mountain Research Station. Prior to leading the team, Ilana was a writer and ecologist with the University of Montana's Fire Center and wrote species reviews and fire regime syntheses for FEIS. Ilana also writes and edits hands-on activities for the Fireworks curriculum, which teaches students about the science of wildland fire. Ilana has a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from the State University of New York at Binghamton and a master's degree in forestry from the University of Montana. Robin is an ecologist for the Fire Modeling Institute in the Fire, Fuel, and Smoke program of the Rocky Mountain Research Station. Based in New Hampshire, Robin writes and edits syntheses of scientific information for the Fire Effects Information System. Robin has a bachelor's degree in wildlife management from the University of New Hampshire and a master's degree in ecology from the University of California, Davis. Prior to working for FEIS, Robin managed several ecological research projects, including a large-scale collaborative project that evaluated the effects of land management practices on wildlife and their habitats. So with that, let's get to the webinar. Take it away, Ilana and Robin.
All right. Thank you so much for that introduction. And let's get started. Hopefully you can all hear me well. So thank you all for attending the webinar today. This webinar is about finding fire ecology and fire regime information online in the Fire Effects Information System, or FEIS. In this webinar, we'll showcase some of FEIS's newest products on fire regimes and demonstrate our new search capabilities. We'll focus on ecosystems in the Northeast, Appalachians, and the Great Lakes region. FEIS is perfect for seeking information on fire. Have you ever asked yourselves questions like these? How might the use of prescribed fire affect a species I'm interested in? How can I find information on historical fire regimes in my area? How have fuels changed in the past 100 years or more? How does wildland fire affect non-native invasive plants? And how might climate change affect fire regimes in the future? The Fire Effects Information System was designed to help answer these kind of questions and many more. For those of you unfamiliar with FEIS, FEIS is an online collection of peer-reviewed syntheses on fire ecology and fire regimes. There are more than 1,200 syntheses in the collection, which cover both native and non-native plants, lichens, and animals in the United States. FEIS is designed to meet the needs of land and resource managers seeking the best available science for use in fire management, fuels management, general land management planning, and NEPA documents. FEIS's website is located at the bottom of this slide, and this is a new web address as of January. To write a synthesis for FEIS, a team of ecologists conducts thorough literature searches and critical analyses of the available information. We describe patterns or lack of patterns, and we explain what is known and not known, and describe the implications for management. All of the information in FEIS syntheses is thoroughly documented using in-text citations. Here is some text that's modified from an FEIS synthesis on white mulberry, a widely distributed non-native invasive shrub. It says, the ability of white mulberry to sprout from stump or roots suggests that top-killed white mulberry plants may regenerate vegetatively following fire. Then there are a bunch of citations. This assertion is documented, but watch what happens when we make a few changes. Now we can see exactly who said what, and the reader can go right to the source for information on stumps by looking at citation 150, or roots by looking at citations 21 and 136. The FEIS team uses in-text citations to direct readers to the sources of information. Now if we look at the addition of the last sentence, however, this response has only been documented once, and fire details and the type of sprouting were not specified. This sentence is doing this. It's putting a hedge around the knowledge to make sure that when you apply it, you're not tempted to stray outside the scope of inference from what Study 61 reported. The FEIS team uses hedges to provide a scope of inference for readers. So why go to FEIS for syntheses when we can just Google the information we're looking for? Well, a Google Scholar search or any citation database search like JSTOR or Web of Science gives you a grocery list of publications. The Google Scholar search for pitch pine and fire yields a list that's over 7,000 citations long. So there's abundant information out there. With this synthesis, an ecologist has done the search for you. We filtered out what is relevant and described the patterns and lack of patterns. And this grocery list is getting longer each year. The amount of fire research is growing. This graph shows that publications on fire have grown exponentially in recent decades, with a total of more than 50,000 citations available on FIRE. In 2015 alone, there were more than 2,300 documents added to this list. So more information is becoming available, whereas staff and financial resources to deal with it are still limited. The purpose of FEIS is to help managers be more efficient at finding and using information on FIRE. FEIS provides 4 types of publications. Species reviews are a staple and have been published in FEIS since 1985. They synthesize information on plant, lichen, and animals' fire ecology and include information of the species distribution, basic biology and ecology, as well as information on fire effects and management. Here's an example of a species review. This one is on pitch pine. FEIS has 2 new types of publications on fire regimes: fire regime syntheses and fire regimes reports. Between the 2 of them, there is information on fire regimes for every plant community in the United States. This is an example of a fire regime synthesis. This one is on montane riparian communities in California and southwestern Oregon. We have not yet developed fire regime syntheses for plant communities in the East, but we're developing them, and we would like you to be aware of these new products. Fire regime syntheses provide an in-depth analysis of the published literature on historical fire regimes in individual plant communities, and they address contemporary changes in fuels and fire regime characteristics for those communities. Each fire regime synthesis includes a section covering the distribution and plant communities discussed, a section covering historical fire regime characteristics, which provides specific details on fire ignition, season, frequency, type, severity, intensity, pattern, and size. They include a section on contemporary changes in fuels and fire regimes. This section may discuss effects of changes in fuels, hydrology, climate change, and non-native and invasive species. Finally, there's also a limitations of information section, which analyzes knowledge gaps and areas of uncertainty and identifies regions and plant community types where fire history data is lacking. In addition to syntheses of the scientific literature, fire regime syntheses provide information about land fires' biophysical settings, or BPSs. In fact, fire regimes in FEIS are comprised of BPSs. Biophysical settings represent the vegetation that is thought to have been dominant on the landscape prior to European settlement. To view the list of individual BPS models covered by the fire regime synthesis, you can click on the link to the Appendix A, highlighted in gray here. To access the land fire data in the appendix, you can click on the URL and it will open a PDF. This PDF provides information on the biophysical settings geographic range, site characteristics, vegetation, and natural disturbances, including fire. Fire regime reports are our other new fire regime products. These provide only brief summaries of land fire information on fire frequency and severity for the group of biophysical settings covered by the fire regime, but they do not include the in-depth analysis of the published literature. Here is an example of a fire regime report on Appalachian oak hickory communities. Right now, most of the fire regimes in FEIS are described by a fire regime report. Reports include a summary table with modeled ranges of fire return intervals, fire severities, and fire regime groups, as well as a distribution map and the appendix, which lists the individual biophysical setting models covered by the report. Fire regime syntheses, in contrast, include all of the information contained in the fire regime reports in addition to the synthesized published literature. And as an aside, one of the reasons we chose to use biophysical settings in FEIS is that the spatial layers and metadata associated with the biophysical settings are being reviewed and updated. Our fire regime syntheses are providing some of the information to update the biophysical setting models. Once the updates are complete, we'll incorporate the changes into FEIS. This provides a positive feedback of information and will make the information in FEIS some of the most up-to-date information on fire regimes available. For those of you interested in knowing more about the biophysical settings and Landfire's efforts to review and update the BPS models, you can go to www.landfirereview.org. The last of FEIS's publication types are fire studies. These are summaries of one or more related research studies that occur in the same location. They provide detailed results on vegetation, fire characteristics, and fire effects. This fire study summarizes the research of a study by Newman and Dickman in Michigan. Fire studies were developed to supplement FEIS's other publications. And now we're going to switch over, and Robin Innes is going to do a live demonstration of our new user interface.
Thank you, Ilana. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I am going to take a moment and share my screen. There might be a little bit of a delay as I do this, so please be patient. Okay. Wonderful. So all FEIS publications can be accessed using the new FEIS user interface, which was released in September. You can do a basic search for a particular species right on the home page by entering a species scientific or common name in the box and clicking on Enter Species. This is a great option if you know what you're looking for. You can browse all of a certain kind of publication by selecting Find All. There are over 1,000 species reviews, 150 fire studies, and 180 fire regimes in FEIS. You can also narrow your search for a particular publication type by using the advanced search options. These are great options if you're looking for information on a particular location or plant community type. Let's say you wanted information on how prescribed fire might affect bur oak. You can find what you're looking for by entering bur oak's common or scientific name in the search box. You could select more than one species name at a time by separating them with a comma. But if you're copying and pasting into these boxes, take care not to paste any extra spaces or you might not get your expected results. After entering the name, simply click on Enter Species. And you can see that FEIS has a review of bur oak that was published in 2011. The acronym has a link to the publication. Some species reviews include information on fire regimes within the synthesis, while others, particularly the older publications, do not. With the addition of our newest syntheses and reports on fire regimes, all the information is now available right here on the search results page. Clicking on the available link under fire regimes brings you to a list of fire regimes associated with bur oak. So you can quickly see what fire regimes the species may have been historically adapted to. So let's go back and take a quick look at the bur oak species review. You can quickly navigate our reviews using the blue hyperlinks in the table of contents. You can cite our reviews, let's see, scrolling down here to using the authorship and citation section. You can copy and paste this citation into your references section. So each synthesis is a little different depending on the information available in the published literature. Under the Distribution and Occurrence section, this review includes a map. All species reviews include details regarding the species' current and historical distribution and occurrence within plant communities. If we go back and click on the Botanical and Ecological Characteristics section of the species review, we see that species reviews of plants include information on the species seasonal development, regeneration processes, and successional status, while species reviews of animals will include information on the species' life history, diet, and preferred habitats. Of course, the focus of each species review is the fire effects and management section. For species reviews on plants, this includes information on post-fire regeneration strategies, fire adaptations, and plant responses to fire. For species reviews on animals, this includes direct and indirect fire effects. All species reviews include a section on considerations for fire managers. In this species review, there's information on restoring what were once oak savannas that are now closed canopy forests. Okay, so let's say you're interested in how fire affects non-native invasive shrubs in your forest. We can go back to the home page and click on the advanced search option for species reviews. And in this case, I'm going to select life form, and I'm going to select shrub. Under nativity, I'm going to select non-native. Under invasiveness, I'm going to select invasive. And we have several options here of finding, to focusing this down to a particular area. In this case, I'm going to look at agency, but we also have plant community and map location to select from. In this case, we can choose from amongst the 5 federal land management agencies. I'm going to select U.S. Forest Service. Region 9 Eastern, and White Mountain National Forest. That's where I'm located today. So we see that species reviews are available for 9 non-native invasive shrubs in the White Mountains. So that's a great way to narrow down your search to a group of species that you might be interested in. What if you're interested in information on historical fire regimes? First, let's go home and use the Find All option to look at every option available. I think it's thinking about it. Sorry for the time lag. Okay, great. We see that FEIS has 184 fire regimes available. And fire regime syntheses were first published in 2013. Anything with the date of 2012 is a fire regime report. So far, the FEIS team has published syntheses for fire regimes in Alaska, California, and Hawaii, so we don't yet have any in the eastern region. However, we hope to eventually publish syntheses of all the fire regimes, so you can look forward to that. The fire regime syntheses or reports can be accessed by clicking on the links under the fire regime title. With a glance, we can see the minimum and maximum mean fire return intervals. The information displayed in these columns is that provided by land fire modeling unless a synthesis was published for that fire regime, in which case it is selected by FEIS staff from information found in published literature. The biophysical settings and data column provides links to the appendix with the land fire information. And there's also links to associated fire studies and species reviews. Like all the results pages, results can be exported into an Excel table for you to access at any time. The results are in alphabetical order by region, and many occur in more than one region. Let's take a quick look at the synthesis on Alaskan white spruce communities. So in addition to the features Ilana mentioned earlier, fire regime syntheses include a summary of the synthesis. This is a kind of synthesis of the synthesis. Reading the summary is a good way to get a quick overview of the information available. Going back, we can click on the Distribution and Plant Community Composition section. This section includes a map of the land fire biophysical settings. You can click on our maps to make them bigger, so you can zoom in and read the legend, which of course is a bit small here. You can also go to the land fire website and download and use this data layer yourself. Going back to the table of contents, the focus of this fire regime synthesis is the historical fire regime section. As we scroll through the document, you can see that we provide images and tables whenever possible to make patterns more visible to readers. We can navigate now to the contemporary changes in fuels and fire regime section. In this review, we have information on fire exclusion, changes in ignition rates and fire size, changes in fire frequency, and climate change. In another synthesis, you might find information on non-native species here. In this region, non-native species were not a big concern. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Well, we know you're not in Alaska, and you want to find an easy way to find fire regime information on plant communities in your area. So let's go back to the home page and click on the Advanced Search option for fire regimes. As you can see, we have the option of searching for fire regimes using a variety of criteria. In this case, let's search for fire regimes of plant communities using the map location search. We have 3 maps available. In this case, I'm going to choose the conterminous US. And you can zoom in and pan as necessary to get where you want to be. In this case, I am zooming in to Michigan, and I'm going to click here near Traverse City, a place I once lived, and I'm going to click Go. And we get 11 fire regimes associated with plant communities that are within a 50-mile radius circle around that location. So as I mentioned earlier, we do not have any fire regime syntheses in this region, but here is an opportunity to look at fire regime reports in more detail. In this case, let's take a quick look at jack pine. We can see from the map here that this fire regime report covers boreal jack pine black spruce forest, Great Lakes pine barrens, and Laurentian Acadian jack pine barrens and forests. Table 1 tells us that the fire regime interval of BPSs in this report ranges from 5 to 12 years, and that replacement, mixed, and low-severity fires occurred in these settings historically. If we open the appendix, we can see, we can find more information about the biophysical settings that make up this fire regime. In this case, we'll click on the URL for the Laurentian Acadian jack pine barrens and forests to take a more detailed look at these PDFs. Here we are. We can find information about the geographic range of this BPS, as well as the soils, information about associated species. This one includes lots of information about historical disturbances, including drought and insects. You'll find information about the scale of these disturbances. And there's all the varied successional classes used in the state and transition model. So this biophysical setting has 4 vegetation classes models, although there may be as many as 5. In early succession here in Class A, we see that replacement fire was modeled at every 5 years, while in late succession, in Class D, we see that they modeled surface fires as occurring every 60 years and replacement fires as occurring every 700 to 1,000 years. So at the end, the model shows that there's a mean fire return interval of 8 years for all fires. And it gives you the averages and minimum maximum of fire size in this case as well. So even without a synthesis, you can find a lot about a plant community's historical fire regime using the fire regime report. So we wanted to show you a little more detail of that, just to give you an idea of what kind of information is available to you. Well, what if a species you are interested in does not have a species review or a fire regime associated with it? Well, back on the home page, we can look at the fire studies are a great option here. Back on the home page, we'll look at the advanced search options for fire studies. Perhaps you are interested in information on prickly lettuce, which is a common non-native forb introduced into every state in the United States. You looked in FEIS for a species review and didn't find one. You looked for a fire regime, but you couldn't find one. But if you did a search for fire studies on prickly lettuce, you would find 7 fire studies that have fire effects information on the species. So a fire study can be accessed using the author links. In this case, we're going to click on Amor et al. So look at the first fire study. So this fire study summarizes the research of 2 studies by the same authors that occurred in the same location in Idaho. So one is published and the other is not. So FEIS has often some potentially hard to find information. We try to make that information more readily available. So I'm going to use the find function to find prickly lettuce in the text. So quickly we can find out that prickly lettuce was considered a fire-adapted species by these authors and that it was most common on high-intensity burn sites. So there's some potentially very valuable and relevant information to you available in fire studies. That completes my live demonstration, and I'm going to take a moment to unshare my screen and give it back to Ilana.
While the presentation's loading, this is Amanda Mahaffey again. I'll just add, if you have any questions for our presenters, please type it into the chat box and we'll address them in order at the conclusion of the presentation. Thanks.
For your patience while it's loading. Great. Okay, looks like I have control again. Perfect.
Just a quick note, would you mind speaking up a little bit? There were a couple folks that had some trouble hearing you. So if you could speak a little closer to the phone, that might help. Thanks.
Sure, no problem. Thanks. Okay, so if after examining the publications that FEIS has to offer and you still don't find the information that you need, we have one more option for you. On the home page, there's a link to the citation database. If you click Go, you'll be taken to the Citation Retrieval System, or CRS. CRS is one of the reference databases that FEIS writers use to find documents to review. It contains more than 60,000 references. CRS is continually being updated with the most recent publications on fire, so it's a great place to go if you're looking to supplement syntheses in FEIS with the most up-to-date literature on fire. CRS also contains rare historical documents. All of the documents in CRS are housed in the Fire Effects Library at the Missoula Fire Sciences Lab in Missoula, Montana. You can contact FEIS staff for help with literature searches because some of our keywords may not be too obvious. So as you can see, we can answer all kinds of different questions using FEIS, and the new user interface is a powerful tool for accessing that information. As a recap, species reviews and fire studies are great resources for syntheses of information on fire effects and fire ecology. And fire regime syntheses and reports are great resources for information on historical and contemporary fire regimes. Last year, FEIS received more than 500,000 unique visits. FEIS gets visits from every state. In 2015, the most visits were from California, followed by Texas, Washington, Oregon, New York, Colorado, Arizona, and Florida. FEIS also had visits from about 54 countries outside of the United States. In 2015, 40% of the 50 most frequently viewed products in FEIS were species reviews of invasive plants. 32% were reviews of native trees. The FEIS user interface and database is relatively new, and we're still improving its contents. Occasionally, you might get some odd results, but we're working on the database regularly, so hopefully that will happen less frequently. We're always looking for feedback on how FEIS is being used and on ways of improving FEIS. So please use the Contact Us link on the homepage to provide feedback. In fact, next year we're hoping to conduct a survey of our users, and we really hope that you'll participate. You can also sign up for FEIS News to get the latest information on FEIS. And with that, that concludes the webinar portion, and we look forward to your questions. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you both so much. That was really wonderful. We already have a couple questions that have come into the chat box, and as folks are listening, I encourage you to type your questions into the chat box, and we'll answer them in the order that they appear. Let's see. The first question, our friends at Mass Fish and Wildlife asked, what is the database structure?
Well, I was looking at that question. I'm assuming they're wondering how this user interface is mining the database. And the database is an access database so that it's mining. So it's essentially all of our information is in that, and we maintain it internally. I don't know if, hopefully that answers the question. If not, please be more specific, and I can help answer more clearly.
Yeah, it looks like they're, yep, they said yes, thank you. Perfect.
Okay, great, wonderful, thanks.
All right, yeah, thank you. All right, the next question we had, Ingela Puma is asking, can you clarify the differences between fire reports, fire syntheses, fire studies, and fire regimes?
Sure, excellent question. So for us, fire regime products in FEIS have two types: fire regime syntheses and fire regime reports. Fire regime syntheses include information from the published literature on historical fire regimes and contemporary changes in those fire regimes. Whereas the fire regime reports do not include information from the published literature. They are based on land fire's BPS modeling. Those BPS models may have included some information from the published literature, as Robin showed you in the PDF. But fire regime reports are very brief. Whereas fire studies are not about fire regimes. They report the literature from one or more related studies, typically one location. And so things that we've targeted for fire studies would be something that has really great information on pre-fire conditions, burning conditions, and post-fire conditions in the fire responses of plants and animals. So hopefully.
Let's see, Inga's typing. We'll give her just a moment. Yes, she says that was great, thanks. Awesome, thank you. So the next question we had, does the FEIS database include any Canadian content at all?
This is Robin. I can answer that question. Yes, we do. We do focus on the United States, but if you go to the user interface and you can choose under state or province any of the Canadian provinces to see what fire regime syntheses cover species that are in those provinces. So that's a good way to find information that might be relevant to you in Canada.
Right, and for example, I completed a species review on white spruce, and as you know, the distribution ranges from Alaska through all of Canada into these. And so information included in the white spruce review includes information from Canada.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. Let's see, this person, yep, he or she responded, perfect, thanks. So that's really good information to have. We'll give folks another moment to type into the chat box. I have a sort of follow-up question. So it was neat when you put in the little pinpoint right on Traverse City. I wonder how, I guess, so it's thinking like within a 50-mile radius, how confident do you feel in in kind of that pinpointing mechanism and kind of the interface between the maps and the information that's presented? Do you feel like FEIS really captures pretty well, like if we put a pinpoint down in my backyard or my town, would I very likely capture and find the information that I'm looking for?
This is Robin. So yes, the data that it's capturing is the land fire information that is available in those maps like I showed you earlier. And so their map has a resolution of about 30 by 30 meters. And we chose a 50-mile radius circle because we felt like anything smaller probably wouldn't be that true. It would be a little too precise. So we feel like, yes, it's very reasonable to assume that something in that big of an area is probably capturing more or less what's in your region. But you have to remember too, it's the historical distribution, the historical distribution of these plant communities, what once was there. So you might, what's obviously on the ground. It's not a VDDT where it's current vegetation. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at the results and in the map.
Great. Go ahead.
To add to that, the map layers are based on, these vegetation maps, and they have been crosswalked quite a bit with many as vegetation maps change. So they've been crosswalked quite a bit. So one caveat would be that search mechanism, you may get quite a bit more than what you anticipate. So you'll get what you want, but you might get some bonuses as well. So one to make sure to make it a little more filtered would be to select the button that you're interested in as well as doing the map search, and then you'll get a slightly more refined results.
Yes, that's a good point, Ilana. And as we, are doing the searches internally, we are correcting our database to try to make those searches more accurate too. So if we see something that seems off, we can go in and fix it. So we're always improving things, as Ilana mentioned earlier.
Very cool. All right, thanks for answering that question. We had a question from Beth Buchanan, who's asking, do you keep track of the species that folks search for, but for which you don't have information? Thinking that would be a good way to capture a new species to add.
No, we don't do that, and I think that is a great idea. I don't know, Robin, if you know if we can do that currently, but that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's possible with the Google Analytics we have available, but we can look into it. That's a great idea.
Awesome. Let's give folks another few seconds to type in questions. Aha, Bill Patterson is asking, please explain to me again how you use the term historical. How does it relate to the term historic and prehistoric?
Well, so historic, the term means something like monumental that happened in history, a historic speech, whereas historical is just something that happened in the past. So we do include some like prehistoric information when it's available. This was especially interesting in Alaska because there was a lot of information coming from sediment cores. And so if that information is available, we include it in our syntheses. And so some of it can go back 10 or 15,000 years ago under different climates, there might be different species compositions. And so we try to include that to the best we can under the caveat that, something that's prehistorically present 10,000 years ago, might be very different from what was there 200 years ago. So, yeah, we try to include all of that information. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I could see who was typing. See if he has a response in the next few seconds that comes through.
Okay.
We also try to capture that in individual reviews. So, and it's somewhat guided by the literature. A lot of times, the majority of publications we review might say, find historical to be, if we're talking in the West, prior to Euro-American settlement, which may have occurred at, this time period, 1850 or 1900. So we kind of capture what we are finding in the literature. So yeah, based on the literature. For, a fun example was in Hawaii, we had, used, pre-Polynesian, pre-Euro-American. So it really is dependent on the literature.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The pre-settlement period will be different depending, on what region you're looking at.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to read, Bill Patterson commented, he says, archaeologists use the term historic as referring to written records. We have a lot of that for New England, but less for the prehistoric period.
Yes. It'll be interesting when we get into the literature for New England, what we can find there. Definitely we've seen like region to region differences in the ability to find, prehistoric information, whether certain lakes and water bodies are better at preserving history than others. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I can't wait to get into the New England literature some more.
Yeah, you can definitely talk to folks in the North Atlantic Exchange. We've had some hot discussions about interpreting fire history. So yeah, it's lots of information out there, but also lots of information gaps that we're trying to fill to help inform our fire decisions today. Other questions? If folks have questions, please type them in the chat box. We have a few more minutes still.
Yeah, and as you're typing, I was just going to say, yeah, part of our purpose of doing what we're doing is to define those gaps so that we can hopefully go and know where to focus, future research and things like that.
And the other plug I would say is, these fire regime syntheses that we're writing, again, they are a new product for us. And we want them to be as usable as possible for folks that are using science to make decisions. And so if you're finding, even if you want to take a look at one that doesn't, apply to your region, it still may be, you can give us feedback, what could be added to this that you would really need or make it useful. We really do value that feedback because we can make changes.
Very cool. Let's see. I don't see any more questions popping into the chat box. I wonder, so for our two presenters, do you have questions that you would want to hear answers to from folks that are on the call? While folks were still signing in, then we were talking a little bit about, who do we recognize on the attendance list from different regions. But do you have any general questions for fire scientists and managers from the Lake States, from the North Atlantic, or from the Appalachians?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess one thing I've been toying with in the back of my head is when we write these fire regime syntheses, we have a section at the end that is contemporary changes. And from my perception, I think that would be one of the most useful parts of these syntheses. You know, what it was historically, what it's like today, how processes have changed. How about, you know, how much, we keep discussing how much we want to go into, well, what's being done? How are these areas being managed today? Is that something, you know, the treatments, I guess, the specific treatments, would that be a helpful addition to these syntheses or not?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Let's see, I see somebody is typing, and anybody in different regions is welcome to type. So how have the processes changed? How are these areas being managed today, and would it be useful to include that information in these syntheses? So we'll give Michelle a moment to type, and anybody else in other regions, you're also, or in the same region. Aha, she says yes, exclamation point, especially if done by region.
Great.
That's one answer. Do other folks have an answer for Ilana? Yep, Bill Patterson is typing, and anybody else is welcome to type anytime she's got a response. Bill Patterson says, yes, exclamation point, but a monumental task for the Northeast, another exclamation point. Yeah, and I think part of what Dr. Patterson may be referring to is in the Northeast, I guess our acreages of treatments and the fragmentation of our landscape and other things definitely complicate matters, and how some areas are treated certainly wouldn't necessarily dictate how frequently other areas are treated. Do other folks have responses? Or if for our presenters, if you have more comments or questions that you want to ask of our participants, then you've got the floor. I guess somewhat related to that, I'll ask a question for me. So climate change and the changes in cold hardiness zones and kind of species, where you find them on the landscape. How is that being incorporated into FEIS?
Can you say that question again? I didn't hear part of it.
Sorry. So climate change and species ranges and changes in plant hardiness zones, et cetera. How are those kinds of changes, ongoing and predicted future changes, being incorporated into FEIS?
So whenever we have that information available in published literature, we include it to the best of our ability. And so for Alaska in particular, climate change has been, there's a lot of published literature on climate, and in that case, we also directed readers to a long list of resources available to them. So we try to provide it both in like synthesis form and as well as having a broader resource for finding that information and going to it directly. Do you want to expand on that, Ilana?
I think you captured it, but exactly, if there's literature on it, and particularly if it's about that particular species we're writing about, then we will include it. With white spruce, there's quite a bit of information, and so there's a section both in the Alaskan white spruce fire regime synthesis and also the white spruce species review. Both had a section on climate change and how white spruce as a species is affected or predicted to be affected, and also on how fire regimes can be affected. So If the information's out there, we will include it in our newer reviews.
Awesome. Sounds great. Let's see. I haven't seen any new questions come in, but thankfully you have your contact info up on the last slide there. There's one more. There's another question coming in. So we'll give them a minute. So thank you to all the presenters, much appreciated. So I think we'll echo what Paul Brewer just said. Thank you to Robin, Ilana, and everyone who's on the line today for joining us this afternoon. So virtual applause from 3 different regions of the United States. Hooray! And just a reminder that if you'd like to review the webinar or share it with someone that might be interested but missed it, we will have a recording of the webinar available through CAFM, through Lake States Fire Science Consortium, and through NAFC on the website soon. We'll be coordinating to make sure we get that information captured and out to anyone who needs it. So once again, thank you very, very much to Robin, Ilana, and everybody for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.